Welcome to Listen with Love, conversations about spiritual direction. I am Suhail, and you are?
Mary Coswin.
And we are both spiritual directors, and we are recording this from St. Benedict's Monastery in Winnipeg in Manitoba, Canada. And in the spirit of the place where we are recording this, we would like to begin with a land acknowledgement.
We are gathered on the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the national homeland of the Red River Métis. We acknowledge that our water is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories, and we acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past. Recognizing that we are all treaty people, we dedicate our efforts toward a more loving and compassionate world as we all move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration.
Thank you. Well, so in a nutshell, we've talked about doing this for many, many months, or maybe I've talked to you about doing it and you've been kind enough to be patient with me. So this is a podcast series on spiritual direction. So I have been a spiritual director for around 8 years. And Mary, how long have you been a spiritual director?
I'm giving away my age, but I guess I started doing spiritual direction in 1982.
Right.
So you can do the math.
Well, I was in utero at that time, so... So we're both spiritual directors, and of course, out of the outflow of that vocation, we've had a lot of very meaningful, soulful conversations, I would say. And so we have developed a very good friendship, I would say, a spiritual friendship. And we've had a lot of conversations over maybe the last few years in particular in this very monastery, sometimes in this very room. And so why don't you tell us a little bit, because obviously you and I know, but people may not know, where are we recording this?
Well, we're right here at St. Benedict's Monastery in St. Boniface. And our monastery is situated in a residential area. We've been living here since July 2023. Mm-hmm. And we come from a monastery that was on the Red River, which was 74 acres. Yeah. So we're in a much smaller area. And I personally was not in favor of coming to the city. But now that we're here, I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I find everything to be close and convenient, and yet we feel like we're surrounded. Like right now, we're sitting looking out the window at beautiful colored leaves and plants and a patio. So it's a good place to be. It fosters a contemplative spirit.
Yeah. Right. And your previous location, well, first of all, let's just back up a bit. Why do you live here in this monastery?
Well, because I'm part of the Benedictine community. I've been part of the community since, I just celebrated my 60th anniversary.
So are you a nun?
I'm a nun, yes. I'm a Benedictine. Of the long tradition of Benedictines,
right?
Over 1,500 years.
Yeah. So you're
making me give away my age.
Well, that's the goal of every podcast, to give away the host's age. Well, so you are 75,
and I'm 77.
You're 77, sorry, and I'm 42. You've been a Benedictine sister for 60 years. And I have not been a Benedictine sister for any years.
I don't think you will be.
So I don't know if you remember this, but when I was thinking about it, I used to go on retreat to the previous monastery premises on the Red River. And I was on retreat one time and sitting under a tree, and you actually came wandering through the grounds, probably because you were trying to make sure I wasn't a trespasser. And so I think you asked me, I don't know what you exactly asked me, but I clarified that I was on retreat and you were very polite and whatnot. And sometime after that, because I had such a wonderful time specifically in the chapel that you guys had at that monastery, I sent an email asking if I could come and pray in the chapel, for an hour or something, some afternoon. And you were the one who responded in true Benedictine order very hospitably. And so I used to come there occasionally to pray in the chapel. But then, of course, the monastery closed and you guys moved. And so then I didn't have a place to come till 2023. Is that when you moved here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then, wouldn't you know, out of the blue, you sent me an email saying something like, Suhail, I know you used to like to come to pray at our chapel. Well, we've now opened again. And if you want to come to the chapel, please do so. Do you remember that?
I don't remember all those things. I do remember you stopping by my office and saying, I'm going to pray. Can I pray? And I thought, I'm so glad people do this.
Pray?
Yeah, well, not just pray, but come to our place, come to our home, and enjoy the chapel. I think it's part of, as you mentioned, hospitality.
Yeah.
I miss and I have always enjoyed people coming to the monastery because it was meant to be shared.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you and a couple of others come and join us in the chapel, or just by themselves.
Yeah. Well, so I had come to your now new monastery in the beautiful chapel, which is just down the hall from where we're recording. And we had never actually had a chance to properly visit to get to know one another. Well, one time after I was in there, you did have some time, and we sat down in one of the other rooms across the way. And you asked me this question. The first question you ever asked me as we began that visit. Do you remember what the question was?
Yes, I do. It was, who is Suhail?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I do remember that very clearly because I could see it made a difference to you. And it makes a difference to me to know people.
Yeah.
And I think that's at the heart of spiritual direction.
That's right.
To know who you are. Not just from my observation. That was a meaningful conversation.
Yeah. Now, I don't know that anyone has ever asked me a question like that before, but it's a great one and very in keeping with spiritual direction, which, as we've mentioned, this is what this whole conversation and this whole podcast is going to be about. So not only are we both spiritual directors, not only have we a deep, meaningful friendship and lots of good conversation, but we also are doing this because we want to deepen people's understanding and appreciation and engagement in spiritual direction. And you had said something about wanting it to be known as something available. Yeah, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's one thing to hear a podcast and learn about spiritual direction, but for people who are listening who have no experience of it, I would like them to know that wherever they are, they can probably make contact with a spiritual director.
Correct.
And whether it's in that particular location face-to-face, there's also the possibility of, God bless, Zoom. My own spiritual director is someone I see on Zoom.
Yeah.
And it's as real as in person. It's not as gratifying, granted, but it's possible. So I would like people to know that if they're moved by anything in our conversations, that they can seek this out themselves.
Yes, right. I think you and I would agree that we would love to see spiritual direction take deeper root in the lives of individuals, in the lives of the church, capital C, in Christian communities, etc. Because it's obviously a very deep and beautiful gift that our tradition offers. And we also hope that for anybody who's listening, that this might be a benefit to them in their own discernment of perhaps a vocation to become a spiritual director. Maybe they're interested in training to become a director, or maybe they are already a spiritual director, and this might just fortify or reinvigorate them in the beauty of this work, and maybe even give them some skills to hone or some things to think about, right?
Yes. Suhail, I was triggered by the word that you used, the tradition. And I would just like to say this is a very old tradition.
Yes.
This is not something people might think of as New Age, or we didn't create it. It's certainly timely, but it has roots way back.
Correct. And we'll devote some episodes to that tradition, and right from the scriptural tradition of the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, and the New Testament. We'll go through that. The other thing was, for existing spiritual direction training programs, perhaps this conversation, this podcast may be a complement to some of the readings and the teaching and some of the discussion they're having, because it sort of puts all of that learning in the context of conversation, a back and forth, a dialogue, so to speak. Would that be good? Does that sort of summarize the aims of what we're trying to do well?
I think so. We've talked about all of this, and it sounds good. We'll see how it evolves.
Yeah. So, as this is our sort of introductory episode, one other thing that I thought was really good that we have, again, touched base about was that obviously the content of our conversation will have a direct relationship to spiritual direction. From the broader themes to more specific dynamics at work in spiritual direction. But we also, because of who we are, the form of the conversation, we also want to reflect some of the dynamics of spiritual direction. So, even making mention of that first question you asked me, like the way that we will talk, we're hoping will emulate some of how spiritual direction feels in terms of listening, good questions, hopefully good questions, observations, a slower pace, that sort of thing. We wanted it to feel like spiritual direction feels, even though this is a podcast and even though we're maybe talking about spiritual direction. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. And I'd say that's one thing personally I've loved about all of our conversations up to date. They've always have had that sort of contemplative aspect and quality to them.
Yeah. Yes. And I think, yes, the contemplative quality, but also a trust.
Yeah. Well, why did we decide to call this podcast Listen with Love?
Well, you decided to call it Listen.
So much for the democratic process here.
No, it's lovely. Listen is a great spiritual word. And it's very dear to me because the rule of St. Benedict begins with the word listen.
Yeah.
And it has repercussions throughout the rule about how we should listen to God, to our inner self, to one another, to nature. Our retreat center's motto used to be conversations that matter.
Yeah, wow.
And they only matter if you're listening to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's a discipline. It's a gift. It's a spiritual. It's part of spirituality. Is really deep listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. It's beautifully said. And I don't know if you've heard this quote. I can't even remember where I came across it, but I've used it left, right, and center since hearing it. But it's something along the lines of, for most people, the line between being listened to and being loved is so thin that they're almost indistinguishable.
Mm-hmm.
I think David Augsburger, a theologian, I've sort of paraphrased it, but that for most people, the experience of being deeply listened to is an experience of love, right? And then I think it was in my first year of spiritual direction training or something around then, another quote that I had heard, which I've always loved and always return to, is that you can listen a soul into being. Mm-hmm. I think that's a paraphrase of a Douglas Steere quote or something. Mm-hmm. And I think that was sort of in my mind as well when I thought about listen with love, because that is what we're trying to do in spiritual direction. Essentially, we're listening with a view to loving the person who's sharing.
Yes. Listening with love speaks of heart work.
Yeah.
And this spiritual direction isn't head work. It's not knowing stuff. It's coming from a deep place of loving the other into speech.
Yeah.
Nell Morton had a phrase that we hear each other into speech, or listen to each other into speech.
Yeah.
And when we really feel listened to, we find ourselves saying more about ourselves and going deeper when we know the person is really listening, not just waiting till we stop talking to get their answer in.
Yeah.
So listening with the heart, or listening with love.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. I also, in the last years, and it's in some ways it's so simple that it almost merits not being said, but I've been very taken by how, in the earliest centuries of Christian faith, they really honed in on, Jesus's instruction that really what this all boils down to is loving God and loving others as yourself. It's the enterprise of love, the practice of love that grounds this whole thing, right? And so spiritual direction is one way in the tradition, in the church, where we seek to love someone by the listening that we offer, but ultimately to love them in such a way that they experience the love of God, that we are somehow a conduit of God's love. And so, yeah, we are listening with love, but really the most beautiful thing for them to experience would be that God is listening to them with love, that God loves them and is loving them into further and further being and becoming,
Yes.
who they've always meant to be.
Yeah, it's so true that, my experience has taught me that most of us don't love ourselves real well. And when somebody else loves us, it awakens something in us, and we're more ready to accept that we are loved. And then we can make the leap to, well, God
Yeah.
must, if this human being can love me, then God must love me. And
Yeah.
I guess I'm lovable.
That's right.
And
yeah.
that's a long journey
Yeah.
for many people.
Yeah.
Because we come with our faults and our mistakes and our sins, and it's important to be heard. Like, hearing each other into speech means I'm now ready to say who I am. The
Yes.
question, who is Suhail? I mean, you can't say everything at once, but yeah.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Well, I'm sure as we go on and talk about other things, it might become even more apparent, both to us and those listening, as to why we've named this Listen with Love, and why we've sort of tethered that to what spiritual direction is about and what we're trying to do in spiritual direction, right? Wonderful. Well, as this is the sort of introductory episode, the first episode, I thought it would be great to begin with a little bit of your story in terms of how you became a spiritual director. And I'd love for you to share. How did you become a spiritual director?
Well, that's a bit of a mystery. I have often said that spiritual direction found me. I did not seek out becoming a spiritual director. It wasn't something, here's a program, I think I'll take it. Actually, my community thought that it would be good for me to further my studies. So in 1979, at the suggestion of my superior, my prioress, I went to a program called Institute of Formative Spirituality, which was in Pittsburgh, housed at Duquesne University. So it was a university course. I got a master's degree, but the focus was not training for spiritual direction, but formative spirituality, which was about how we are formed as human beings, as spiritual beings. So there was spirituality, there was psychology, there was phenomenology, and that was the basis for human formation.
Yeah.
Not just spiritual direction formation. So, and the reason why I mentioned this particular program is it was a precursor to many of the programs that trained spiritual directors. Because at that time, there were not maybe less than a handful of programs of training for spiritual direction. There might have been a couple of Jesuit places, maybe a Benedictine retreat house, but they offered only individual workshops or retreats.
Yeah.
And then programs began to develop. So really, I was not trained as a spiritual director. I was trained in formative spirituality, which taught that people are formed within, there's an intra-formation within ourselves. There's formation between ourselves and another. There's formation in a community, and there's formation in the world.
Yeah.
So those 4 elements. And then when I got back to Winnipeg, I started being asked to be a spiritual director for people. So I'm not sure, I didn't hang out a shingle, but it must have been something in my background that attracted people to ask me. And then I did some Jesuit spiritual direction, and then we started our own program.
Okay, well, let's revisit that. So you said when you got back from that formation program, people started asking you to be their spiritual director. So how did that happen?
The first request came from a religious community, and they had a novice, someone just beginning their life as a Good Shepherd sister. Mm-hmm. And I was asked to accompany her. And I said, oh, no, I don't do that. I hung up the phone and I thought, but I just finished studying that. Why did I say no? And it was just like, I was kind of awestruck and worried about, could I do this? So I took her on as a spiritual directee, and then others came forward.
Wow. So that call initially just came out of the blue?
Out of the blue.
You didn't put your name in the newspaper. I guess there was no social media back then in the dinosaur age. I mean, in the 1970s.
Well, it was 1981.
I'm sorry, yes, in the 1981s. Yeah, so someone just randomly called you and asked you to accompany them in spiritual direction.
Yes.
And then that just led to others asking?
Yes. Sister Virginia was in charge of the retreat center at the time, and she started a program called the 19th Annotation. It's a Jesuit spirituality program.
Yes.
And it was throughout the year, and she asked if I would be one of the directors. So that launched me into having people come for spiritual direction using the Jesuit spirituality, the Ignatian exercises, which was not really my style.
Right.
But what was my style was listening to people.
Yeah.
I learned a lot from that experience. And then I guess word got around, and then I don't remember advertising, but I guess there was something like that. And then I developed a practice.
What you say about it finding you is true in your story. You really didn't go out looking for directees, and in fact, you said no initially. Right. Wow. And we should make a note to, at some point in this series, to talk about the 19th Annotation and the spiritual exercises of Ignatius and all of that. So remind me.
Sure. Having said that, it's not my style.
I know. That's okay. Okay.
I'll say why when we get to that.
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, I wonder if we could also back up a little bit, even before you went to train in that formation program and then the things that happened subsequently. You know, you have been a Benedictine sister now for 60 years, And as we already established, and apparently this is a theme, your age, you're 77. We keep revisiting that.
Thanks.
How did you become a Benedictine nun?
I seem to back into everything. Where can I start? Well, I went to St. Benedict's Academy when it first opened in 1961.
That was a middle school, a high school? Or?
It was junior high and senior high.
Okay.
And they had just opened. My well-meaning Ukrainian relatives saw it advertised in their church bulletin that there was an open house that day. And after a little resistance, I joined my family and we went to see this school. And it was kind of spooky. I remember sitting in the hallway, and I guess there was wind, and there was this sound like ooh. That's what I remember about this visit. And of course we went to it was a boarding school as well as a day school.
Okay.
And my mother looked at the rooms and she said, "Oh, look, Mary, you can have one facing the chapel." And I thought, who said I wanted to face the chapel? But I ended up going to the school. And after a couple of years, I was attracted to what I experienced there, knowing nothing really about being a sister, really.
Mm-hmm.
The sisters were good. They seemed to like me, even though they were strict and I got into trouble and they had to call me to the office. I knew that there was care there. And I loved the chapel. The stained glass windows were mesmerizing. And we went to pray every morning and every evening, and the sun setting in the evening was just so attractive. And I think that's where the call came. It was the beauty. See, I'm a 4.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that chapel, the light. And God met me there. I didn't know that I was grieving, but my father died when I was 12. So I think that's why my relatives thought I should go to a Catholic boarding school. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by I backed into being a sister. It attracted me, and I thought, well, I guess being a sister is enjoying some of this. And so I applied, and I wasn't refused.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
So your school was on the grounds of your previous monastery.
Yeah, the retreat center was our school.
Wow.
After only 9 years, it closed.
Mm-hmm. I noticed when you were telling the story of being there in the chapel, you used the word attracted. I was very attracted by the light and the stained glass. And what do you mean when you say attracted?
It just resonated with me somehow. It was, what can I say? I just felt drawn to, I think, God, but it didn't strike me as God. It was just God's beauty, and then the dream that I had that confirmed an invitation to somehow, in my adolescent mind, was like giving myself to Jesus.
What was the dream?
You really want to hear this?
I asked.
Okay. Well, I was in Holy Rosary Church, but there were no pews. There was just a lot of my friends in a circle, and we were dancing. Dancing was I liked dancing, still do. We were just dancing in this circle, and there was a statue of Mary with the candles. You might have seen in front of a statue where you go and light the candle for a certain intention.
Yeah.
And the candles disappeared, and all of a sudden she started moving. And I said to the guy behind me, "She's coming for you, Ted." And then everybody disappeared. and she came toward me, and she picked me up. I'm stunned. What's going on? She took me to the altar, and there was fire on the altar. And I was afraid. And then I said, which was so unlike me at the time, I said, "Oh, it's okay. I'll be with Jesus."
Mm-hmm.
And that was the end.
Wow.
And that dream is as vivid to me now as it was then. I didn't know what it meant. I mean, I thought, what is, I was 14 years old.
Yeah.
So,
well, I have the privilege of being able to see you as you're telling the story, and if only people could see your face as you retell the story and your eyes as they glisten here as you recall it. It's obvious to me it's as vivid to you now as it was when you were 14. And so that was the dream that sort of confirmed to you to join the Benedictine order.
Well, in a way, it didn't immediately say, "Oh, I had this dream, therefore I'm going to ask if I can join the community." But it was all part of the mix. It was part of, to put it in terms of my training, the formative aspects of my life were falling into place to lead me to that.
Yeah.
It was the people, it was my own dream, it was the community.
Yeah. So, being in the chapel, you said there was an attraction. What would you describe the dream as being?
It was, at first, maybe a bit puzzling, but as I recalled it over and over, it seemed to have some meaning for me. I felt maybe closer to God.
Yeah.
Closer to Mary.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, you're welcome.
Powerful.